Welcome to the Fintech Founder Journey, where we explore great fintech products, great fintech businesses, and great fintech leaders. I'm your host, Mike Scott, and I'm also the co-founder and CEO of Nona Digital, an expert firm that accelerates product development for fintech and blockchain scale-ups. In today's show, I'm joined by Nirit Rubenstein from Dovely, and we'll be discussing her journey building a credit improvement platform. Today's episode is sponsored by Nona Digital. Working with us to accelerate your fintech product means you get access to our expert product squads that cover development, UI, UX, product ownership, and architecture, and that have been building products together for a very long time. You get the benefit of a 40-person studio that is big enough for no key person dependencies to exist, but small enough so that you're always close to one of the principals. And you get the benefit of our reusable component library, which means we're often able to build your product faster than anyone else could at a comparable standard. As one of our clients said, Nona is the type of business that paints the back of the wardrobe, because if you want to be the best, that's the type of thing that you do. To get in touch with one of our principals or myself, head over to nona.digital to book a call directly. And now onto the show. Today, my guest is Nirit Rubenstein, who's a really impressive woman. Her career has been diverse and vast, but I'll highlight just some of the things that stood out for me. Way back in 1995, she was an Airforce Instructor in Israel. She spent 5 years with Salesforce across financial analyst and marketing strategy roles. As CEO of Credly between 2014 and 2018, she led the second largest credit repair company in the US following its acquisition by Tregaron Capital. Nirit serves on the advisory board of the Arizona-Israel Technology Alliance. She has got a BA in Business and Economics and an MBA graduating cum laude. All of this has led to her current focus, which is as the CEO and co-founder of Dovely. Dovely is a fully automated credit improvement platform based on sophisticated algorithms that are proven to impact credit scores. There are around 20 people today and growing. They've raised just under $6 million to date, and they're growing really nicely. Welcome, Nirit. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with my brain. I just can't pronounce your name properly. So
it's a hard name. No worries.
Cool.
You're doing better than most, so you're above average.
I usually pride myself on getting this right because I speak to people from all over the world, but I don't know what it is. I just can't get my brain around your name. Okay, so let's begin at the beginning. It's 2018. You're the COO of a really fast-growing business, but you decide to start Dovely. So talk me through why this was so important to you and how you went about sort of moving away from this COO role and moving into what is now a growing business, Dovely.
Yeah, it was a very hard decision. I most of my career has been in California, and one of the investors in the last company that I was running in California is a CEO and owner of a large unified communications company out here in Nextiva, and he recruited me to join. And at the time, I had no desire to move to Phoenix, but he threw an offer my way that was difficult to refuse. I joined the company, and I felt like credit was kind of following me everywhere I was going. So it's very difficult in the US to really do anything if you don't have a good credit score. It's very difficult to get access to pretty much anything. So I would be in line at Target, and the guy in front of me would be asked if he wants a red card, and he would say, "No, my credit's horrible. I won't qualify. I'm taking an Uber," and the guy's talking to me about wanting to buy a home, but he can't because his credit isn't established. So I felt like credit was just there and following me everywhere that I was going, and I felt like I knew how to address that problem. And at the same time, I had met somebody who's a very important part of my life today and has been since I met her. She's an executive coach, and she started as my friend, not as my coach, and happened to come into my life at a time where she saw in me what I knew was in me, but was afraid to kind of, let go to, and really gave me the kind of push I needed to go out and start on my own, which was very, very scary coming from a very established job at big companies with big titles, big pay. So it was really scary to leave that behind.
Yeah, I mean, I really love that because there's often a catalyst, and that catalyst is often a person. And
Mm-hmm.
I really love that somebody can know you so well, because I mean, that's a big thing to push someone to do, right? It's kind of like
Yeah.
move the security, move into an unknown. And there's a responsibility, whether you acknowledge that or not, of being that instigator. So that's really great. And it sounds to me like she's moved from a friend to a coach role, which is really interesting.
She's moved to a lot of things. I mean, she's an investor in Dovely now. She's really my go-to person for anything. She knows me very well. She believes in me. She pushes me. So she's become a very, very big part of my life. And I like to tell her that only good things have happened to me when she's pushed me to do them. So
I love that. I need one of those in my life, I think.
yeah,
Cool. So talk to me about like your experience from 0 to 1. So you're a very experienced executive. You now move into this founder role. You raise some seed capital. What was your experience from going from, hey, I've got this hypothesis or I've got this idea, to actually getting your first your first customers or your first users? Talk me through, like, did you guys build a POC first, or did you go straight into building an MVP, or was this actually just conversations that you were having with people? Like, how did you go from, hey, I want this thing to exist, to we've got customers?
So Tedis, my co-founder, and I wanted to start this idea years ago when we were both working at the PE-backed credit repair company. That's when I met him. We wanted to start what is now Dovely when we left that company, but I got recruited to come join Nextiva. And so when I was thinking of leaving Nextiva, I called Tedis and I said, hey, I'm thinking of leaving. I can't shake this idea of this, credit, what we wanted to build. And he said, it's interesting because I can't either. And I've been working with Karam, who's a developer who we've worked with before and is now an integral part of our team today at Dovely, and built a prototype. So he demoed the prototype for me, and we were just off to the races ever since then. And I think the interesting part of it for me about starting a company was it wasn't until I had the responsibility of having to pay somebody that I really started to make this my full-time job. It was kind of like I was dabbling in it. I was doing it a little bit. I was still kind of not defined yet as to what it is that we're building. And as soon as we hired that first person, it was, okay, we're going, right? And
there is so much. I want to jump in there, because that is a really, like, there's a lot of wisdom in that, right? Like, I'm sure you get asked to speak to sort of young founders or be on panels or what have you. And I think you've just articulated actually how I'm going to cut through the noise with a lot of these conversations, because often it's like people are sitting there and playing and procrastinating and doing this and doing that. And I think I'm going to steal that from you. I think I'm just going to say, like, hey, if you believe enough in this, go and hire somebody and find the money to do it. Because if you're not going to do that, you're not actually serious about this.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's
I
when it
think they're really
became
cutting
real.
through the noise.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
And then that was it. The first hire we made obviously was engineering, and he helped us make the prototype a reality and turn it into something that could enroll customers. And my philosophy is it's better to be fast than good. And so we really threw something out there knowing that it left a lot to be desired, let's just put it that way. But we wanted to get something out there, get customers on the platform, prove that we had a product that people wanted, and then really letting the customers drive our product innovation. I think so much of what we do today as a company is driven by what our customers' needs are, and not us sitting in a room and trying to think of what our customers need, right? Of course, we do a lot of that as well as brainstorming, but we try to push out as much as we can and see what customers are finding valuable. And that's what we end up investing more resources in and really kind of innovating more on.
So this guy that you mentioned now, the guy that built the platform, was he your co-founding CTO?
No. So my co-founder is Tedis. He is you can think of him as the brain of credit. He is anything relating to credit he's kind of our encyclopedia. Okay. He understands credit like nobody's been, probably top 5 people in the entire country. He is technical, but he's not an engineer. Karam was one of the very first, he used to work with us at the previous company. He was in India at the time, has now moved to Australia, and has now become one of our main engineers. He's not our VP of engineering / CTO, but he is definitely kind of top lead engineer that we have. We're actually working to get him an O1 visa now from Australia out here to the US.
How important do you think it is to have a technical co-founder? Because it sounds to me like you're very strong with strategy, operations. Your career has been quite wide, but it doesn't sound like you're deep technical. Then you've got
I'm not
your co-founder.
at all.
Yeah. So you're strong with operations, strategy, finance, etc. Yeah. You've got your co-founder who's absolute subject matter expert within the credit space.
Exactly.
You've got a very strong, let's call it engineer hire number one, but you don't actually have a technical co-founder from what I'm hearing.
We don't. Yeah.
How's that experience been? Has it been a hindrance? How have you gotten around all of that?
It has. I mean, our first CTO was essential to getting us to where we were going, but at the same time was also at a certain point became a hindrance and didn't allow us to. It prohibited us from going where we needed to go, and that was at the point where we needed to say, okay, we need to sever ties with this person and start looking for another VP engineering / CTO. And we've been very, very fortunate. We found Mike, who came from 7 years at Tesla and is now really our right-hand person and might as well be a co-founder, but is not a co-founder. I think it's hard to say, because for me to sit here and tell you, don't invest in a company or don't don't put a lot of stock in a company that doesn't have a technical co-founder, it's not true, but it does make it a lot harder. It's definitely, I think, easier when you have a technical co-founder who is as vested as you are in the success of the business. We now have that, but we haven't had that from the beginning. And so it's difficult, but it's not impossible.
Something you said just makes me reflect on what I see quite a lot. And that is that very often non-technical founders pair up with what they think is a CTO type or a technical co-founder type, but actually that person is just a developer, like quite a strong developer quite often. Yeah. That's not the same as a technical co-founder that you want. No. It's not the same as a CTO. In fact, quite often, really good developers get promoted into ineptitude. They're extremely good engineers, and therefore they get promoted into a CTO role. They're terrible CTOs, right? Because it's a different skill set. And we see that quite often. We sort of see this founding team with a really strong engineer who's built their MVP. Then they hit some success. They might even sort of begin to hit the early stages of product market fit. And that person then becomes a hindrance, because all they want to do is write code and get things shipped, but you actually need a totally different skill set at that level. It's a strategic skill set from a technical perspective. Right. And it sounds like that's what you kind of experienced here.
We did experience that, but our hindrance was not that he wanted to write code. Our hindrance was that he just wasn't a good fit for the culture and what it is we were trying to achieve, right? And so but you're absolutely right in that it's not enough to just have a technical co-founder. They need to have that business mindset and understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish. I mean, as a startup, not being fast is a killer. That's our biggest competitive advantage, is speed and being able to. Of course, like, we have a lot of other things, right? The Tedis is not expertise and my experience in management. We have a killer team, but at the end of the day, being able to iterate quickly and pivot quickly and move fast, that's what's going to keep us ahead.
And, it's interesting because, and I'm painting in broad strokes here. Of course, this is not every engineer, but a typical engineer, what you just said will make them shudder, because what they're going to argue is but it's got to be done right. The standards have to be, perfect. The stuff needs to be perfect before it gets shipped. And actually that tension is quite healthy. So somewhere in the middle between shipping things and route to market as quickly as possible, and it's got to be done right, somewhere there's a rub, and that rub is a healthy tension. I think, again, that's why, when we see developers promoted into a CTO role, they're often just pulling developer standards outside of the business context. When you have a very strong engineer that is making decisions at a business value first, that's often a good fit for a CTO, which is quite difficult, because that often means that, okay, we should do this at X standard. We're going to drop that standard just a little bit in order to get the business forward. And then there's that technical debt conversation, which, you're playing in the financial services space. We won't get into technical debt, but technical debt should be used and thought of like normal debt. It can be useful. It can be also very, very bad. Cool. Super, super interesting conversation.
The one thing I think was a really important lesson for me I've never been big on titles. To me, it's been the easiest thing in the world to give to people. And so it was very easy for me to hire a CTO. But what that prevented me from doing was hiring above that person. Because once you hire at the C level, you can't bring somebody in above that person. And I think that was a really important lesson to me is titles aren't important, but you do have to give people the ability to move up or to hire above them if needed, especially at this stage as a startup. So that was something that I learned the hard way.
Yeah, that's a really good insight. It's almost like, cool, dude, you can have the CTO title. I don't care.
Right.
But now you've limited yourself because that's the most senior hire you can make. That's actually a really good insight. Cool. So, the talent market is sort of hot on everybody's lips at the moment. It's very difficult to hire good talent. In my experience, mainly engineering talent, but also just good sales talent, just good talent. I think the whole world's
took us 5 months to find a financial analyst. So.
Yeah, it's just the whole market has become quite fluid, and geographic borders are now gone because of COVID, and it's a crazy, crazy market. So 2 things have struck out here for me. One, if you've got a great team and you can hold on to them right now, that's actually a competitive advantage. And 2, the negative side of that is like attracting and retaining, or let's say attracting talent has become really difficult, but not impossible. Just talk to me about like your strategy on talent. In the pre-interview, we discussed you have quite a distributed team. You've got a strong network in the US, but also a strong network in Israel. Both of those are very good territories for talent, although quite competitive. Obviously, the US is very competitive. I don't know how competitive Israel is. I just know there's really good engineering talent there. Talk to me about like your strategy in terms of building the best possible team in a distributed fashion.
So first of all, my overarching North Star when it comes to hiring is to hire for the person versus the skill set. And that applies, I would say, to 99% of our hires. Where you do need to make sure you have the right skill set is somebody needs to be able to code, right? They may not be able to code in your language, but they still need to know how to code. Or if you're hiring a creative director, they need to be able to create beautiful, designs, right? But I think one of the things that sets me apart is being able to see in people. I really believe that if somebody is smart and they're really willing and eager and they want to work for you, that's kind of a winning combination. And you can usually teach them anything that you need to. It's much harder to get the people with the right mentality than it is to get the actual people with the skill set. And so for me, that's my kind of number one hierarchy in hiring is this person going to have the hunger, the drive, the smarts to pick up things, and are they going to fit culturally within our organization? And I think that served us very well. In terms of retaining talent, you really have to understand every individual at their level. Like I'll give you an example. We have a killer mobile engineer, and he's extremely interested in blockchain. And I recognize that if I don't give him something as it pertains to blockchain, he's going to leave and he's going to go somewhere else because that's his passion, right? So thinking about applications to blockchain as it pertains to the world of credit and making him my subject matter expert to research, to look into things, to think about how we might start to dabble in it in a small kind of way, that's a way to retain him, right? And then in terms of hiring, look, it's really, really hard to hire right now. And it's very easy to just say, screw it, I'm going to hire this person, even though they're not exactly what I wanted. But that really ends up biting you in the long run. And I have had people that were really good on paper, what I wanted, but they didn't want to work at Dovely enough. If somebody can't articulate to me why they want to work for for our company, they're not going to be a good fit. Right. And it depends on the role. Like if I'm hiring for customer service, it's different than I'm hiring as a key person to be on my dev team. Right. But I do need to see that hunger for working for us in particular, not just for any company.
So many things that you touched on there. I mean, number one, I've just finished reading Radical Candor, which I don't know why I put that off for so long. It's just such a fantastic book. And they speak a lot about everything you've just mentioned, but a couple of things stood out there for me. Number one, I love the fact that you're taking the time to get to know, in this particular case, this guy who's really interested in blockchain, and then saying, hey, let me find things to keep him interested. But there's also a challenge there because, we can't do that for everyone. It's got to be within the sphere of our business, right? So, to your point, like you've got to want to work for the business, and then within the remit of that business to find things that are interested for that person. If it's outside of the remit of the business, it's probably not the right person or not the right business. And I've seen that as well, as where we've had people come in and have a massive passion in something that actually has nothing to do with our business.
Right.
And try to sort of retrofit that. And at the end of the day, you sort of say you're an amazing person, but actually this business is this thing. If your passion is like way out there, then you should probably follow your passion. And that's not here. We can't sort of shoehorn that into this business.
And I believe that. I believe that true. That's true also for the size of the company. Like some people don't. I mean, I had a conversation right before I came in here where we have an employee who's very overwhelmed and things are constantly changing for her. And I said to her, look,
this is what's up.
Like this is a startup. You need to go through your own journey and work for bigger companies and work for startups and see where you find yourself to be the most comfortable, right? And where what's your sweet spot? And it's not for everybody. Right. So anyway, sorry. Keep
no,
going.
100%. I mean, we've had, I think of one particular person we hired who was just absolutely instrumental in the early days of our business. But as we grew, it became really evident that she wasn't a great team player. She was a massively amazing army of one, but she could not play in a team. And as we got bigger and bigger and bigger, the team became a really important thing. And she ended up leaving the business in good graces. But it was really interesting to see this, that like she was an absolute superstar in a very small business. The minute it got bigger, where they needed team environment, she like fell apart. She couldn't deal, and that was a really interesting insight for me because she was an A-team player, right? She was your like typical like she's amazing, but the business cycle was different for her. So really, really interesting. Talk to me about, and this is a selfish question that I'm always curious about because this is where we play. We're a services business, so you've built a team. That team is in charge of your core product. Like you wouldn't outsource, I doubt, anything around your core product. That you've got to own. It's your IP. It's how you build your moat. It's all of that stuff. But in this current market right now, very, very few people that I speak to are building 100% internally. A lot of them want to. In fact, almost every one of them say, hey, Mike, if we could just hire internally and never have to work with partners, we would do that. And I agree with that. But pretty much none of them can do that at the moment that are growing quickly. How are you approaching working with external partners and experts on specific projects, or are you building everything in-house? I know your team is distributed geographically, but they're hired by you. What is your strategy to working with partners versus in-house?
We do have one dev shop that we're working with that was referred to us by one of our advisory board members. I think it's tough because I can tell you that I have worked with several dev shops, including at Dovely. I mean, we've tried probably 4 or 5 different times. We had a time where we had 4 different dev shops going on at the same time. We had 1 or 2 people from each place. It's just very inconsistent. Even if you get somebody very good, the next person is horrible, right? Even from the same company. And so I think for me, I really struggle with hiring kind of third, offshore or dev shops that don't own what we do. I'm extremely frugal when it comes to running the business. And so for me, it's always, how am I going to get this done? And I found that hiring kind of dev shops, or, I know that's probably not a nice way of placing of kind of calling them, but
it is what it is.
It's always burned me. It's always cost me time. It's cost me money. So I think my preference will always still be to continue to do things as much as possible in-house. And, we're looking at different things, for example. So we met with somebody today from the government in Canada, because they're really trying to help people come there and build another kind of headquarters within Canada. So they have all these programs that connect you with universities in Canada, or they make it really easy for you to transfer people from different countries to Canada. And so I think we'll probably end up going that route versus dev shops in the future.
Yeah, look, this might sound strange because, our model is working with companies like yours, but very often people say, hey, Mike, should we insource or should we outsource? And my answer is always the same. It's like, man, if you can attract the talent, build the team, train the team, optimize the team, you should totally do this in-house.
Yeah.
The thing is, it's just really, really difficult. And most companies can do it if they're lucky to like their first team of, let's say, 10, 15, 20 people. But the minute you sort of hit product market fit and you now sort of raise a big series A, B, or C, and you have a lot of resource, the challenge becomes keeping up with that roadmap, because your VCs have now gone, cool, there's your $50 million round.
Right.
We want to see a really accelerated roadmap. That means you've got to hire 100 engineers. There's no ways you're going to hire 100 engineers in this current market in any reasonable amount of time.
Yeah.
So then it's like, okay, well, plan B is let's find really great partners. But it's tricky, right? Because of exactly what you say. It's very, very difficult to find an outsourced company that's going to care as much about your product as you do, that's going to fit the culture, and that's going to be an extension of your business. It's tough.
I think it's one thing Nextiva's actually done really well is they have a whole company of a whole group of engineers in Ukraine and now in Mexico, but it's their people, right? So they find the person who is going to bridge the gap between the US and wherever that is. And they find the space, they bring in the whole team and they hire them to be Nextiva employees. And so I think that I have seen work successfully. Dev shops, it's like 1 in 10 are decent. And so it's working through the 9 to get to the 10th is very difficult and time consuming and expensive.
Yeah, 100%. Not easy. So talk to me about raising. Let's move off that. As much as I'd love to talk about that forever, but let's move off that. So you've raised just under 6 million. And correct me if I'm wrong, but those are seed rounds. So you haven't done a Series A round yet.
We have not done a Series A. Yeah, we did like seed and seed plus. We did our official seed about 1.5 years ago, and then we raised an additional 3 million on a uncapped safe back in June of this year.
And what's your experience been like? My experience of the capital markets at the moment are that they're absolutely crazy. We're just seeing our clients and people raising. I don't want to say easier than it's ever been, but it feels like it's easier than it's ever been.
It is easier than it's ever been.
What's your experience of it?
In some ways, it's setting people up for failure. I think if we wanted to go out right now and raise at an exorbitant valuation, we probably could. I don't think that that's necessarily the right thing to do, because I think that's just setting us up for, it's not even delivering against it. It's setting you up for a down round at a later stage. And so it's, for me, it's about raising. First of all, I think it's finding the right partner, which is very difficult to do. And so for me now, every time I've raised, I have chosen the partner over the brand name or the valuation. And that has served me well.
What do you mean by that? Like, talk me through that. Like, I'm guessing what you're saying is like money's pretty easy to find, but the right strategic partner that's actually going to add more value than just money is really difficult to find. But how are you evaluating that?
The first statement about money being easy to find, just to give you perspective, being a woman raising during COVID was probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And so it's not that it definitely wasn't easy for us. We were raising our seed round right when COVID hit, and all investors put a complete block on any outgoing money, so that we were raising in March of 19, right? And so that was not easy. I think now it's easier, but raising as a woman on Zoom during COVID was near impossible.
Can we jump into that? Because I find that, are you comfortable speaking about like what that experience was like? So being a woman, why that was more difficult for you? My
entire career, I've been the only woman in the room. Okay. So I'm not, that's not new to me. It doesn't intimidate me. I don't even think about it. Sometimes I look around the room and I'm like, oh, yet again, only woman in the room, but it's never kind of prevented me from doing anything. It's never been a limiting belief for me. I've never been the victim. I can tell you the first time in my life where I've actually felt it be a disadvantage was when I was raising money. And it's hard to say why. It's like you would get so close and then it would be like, we just can't find the conviction, or, some BS excuse, or they would just ghost you. And And I know men have that experience too. So, I'm not a man, so I don't know what it's like. It just seems to me sometimes that men that have much less experience and traction it's easier for them to get money. And again, that might be a misconception, but that's how it seems to me. And so you're talking to men. I think I've talked to 2 women out of 100 VCs that we've talked to. And one of them was it was like why is this one woman, finally I'm talking to a woman and she's such an airhead. It's like, it was frustrating. I wanted to shake her, but I don't know. It's just harder. It was much, much, much harder.
Yeah.
So I don't know what else happy to answer any questions about it.
No, it was just interesting. I mean, you've been honest about that, and sometimes it is just it's a gut feel, right? Like you can't quantify it necessarily, but you just had a strong sense of that. Which,
and there's lots of stats around it. I mean,
Yeah.
I think to me the most compelling one that I saw was DocSend. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but that's what you use to get your investor deck out to investors. And they did a study, and they showed that for men-founded startups, they were focused. All of the investors were focused on the vision, the idea, kind of what the company is. And on women, everything was focused around the traction and the stats. And so that was really compelling to me, and just so hypocritical, So it's just one of those things that I know is out there and exists, and it was hard. It was hard to have that kind of hurting our ability, knowing that hurt our ability. I mean, at one point I even said to, our head of business development, who's got the pedigree, Stanford, Harvard, was like, you should just go pitch because you're going to get the money. Like, it just doesn't even matter at this point.
It's crazy,
I don't have an ego about it.
Yeah. It's crazy. I was reading just yesterday how they've run certain blind. I actually kind of like this. It's kind of impossible to do this when you're pitching because they're gonna want to meet you as the founder. But just dream with me for a second. Like, if you could do these pitches completely anonymously, so it's like there is no name, there is no gender, there is no race, there's just nothing. It's just like, here's a pitch from a human. Like, they've done that in orchestral applications. And they've done it in certain job interviews. And when they've done it, they've seen a 5x increase on female selection. In other words, when they don't know they're talking to females or males, they've seen a 5x improvement on the females actually getting the gig or getting the job. Yeah. But you can't do that in VC, right? Because what do they always say? Like, timing is most important, and then it's about the team. So it's almost like, how do they make the team without seeing that you're a woman or X race or what have you? I mean, it's an impossible thing to do, but it's got to change, right? It has to change. And I guess what I just say to you is like, well done for just going like, I'm just going to keep doing this anyway, like, because you're making it easier for the next woman, or like, your daughters, if you have daughters, because you're paving the way. So I get it that you can't necessarily say, hey, Mike, here's the data point that I can prove to you it was harder. But I get it. And the reason I was pushing on that was not because I wanted like empirical data. I just wanted to like get an idea of your experience, which is what you've shared. So thanks for sharing that. Because I think it is broken. I think it's getting fixed, but I think it's still pretty broken.
I know you wanted to talk about kind of picking the right VC. I don't know if you're still interested in going down that route.
Yeah, sorry, I interrupted you. Please go on. Yeah.
I just, look, you don't know for sure who you are getting into bed with, right? It's really hard to know for sure until you're actually in the trenches with a person. But for me, talking to different founders, and not just founders that they've invested in, but not just founders that they give you, but actually founders that you find on your own, is really important. And trying to get really clear on how they behave when things don't go well, right? Everything's fine and dandy when everything's going the right way, but what happens and how do they react when things aren't going the way that they need to be going? And I think, to me, that's the most important thing. And when a VC, I remember having a call with a VC, and I said to her, well, how are you guys different? She said, everyone's just going to give you the same bullshit. We do this, we bring that. She's like, at the end of the day, we are there for you when things are shit. And that's
Yeah.
how we're different, and that really resonated with me because that's true. That's what you want.
Yeah, 100%. There's something we do in our business is we're completely transparent with numbers. So every week at our all hands or company-wide stand-up is what we call it. We share all the numbers except salaries, because a while ago we voted and people didn't want to share salaries. And people are often like, oh, but that's cool, Mike, but you've also just posted on LinkedIn that you've just had a record quarter and everything. And I was like, yeah, it's easy to share numbers when you're killing it. But we do it when, in years gone by, we've done it when things have been really bad.
Right.
Like we've done it when things have been like, hey, these numbers are painting a really, really bad picture of the business.
Right.
And that's actually when it matters. That's when it matters more, because that's when you buy loyalty and,
Exactly.
people are going, shit, man, these guys are doing some stuff that must be really scary. Now I believe them when they're telling me the other stuff. So like, hey guys, here's the reality. It's bad. This is what we're going to do to fix it. Now, I'm glad to say this, we haven't had to share shitty numbers for a very, very long time. But now that we're sharing the good numbers and people have been with us for a long time, it builds that credibility. And it's the same thing you've just said with the VCs, right? It's like, we'll be here when it's shit. But I love what you're saying, because again, her just telling you that doesn't mean anything. You've got to go and speak to the founders that have had shit and have had them support them through those shitty times. So that's really good advice. I've just looked at the time and we're flying through this time, which is a good thing, but I've got to start sort of drawing it slowly to a close. So let me just ask you this sort of, however this lands for you, what does the next 3 years-ish look like for Dovely? I don't know how far you guys look out, but what does the next sort of medium-term period look like for Dovely?
Oh, it's so hard to say. I mean, we're working on so many different things right now, and it's hard to say which of those is going to be the snowball effect and take off. The way I really think about it is you have petri dishes and you put all your things out there and you don't know which ones are going to bloom. So we are looking to, we have a couple of very, very big partnerships that are very exciting that we hope we'll be able to announce soon. And we're looking to continue to expand in the platform of kind of being your financial pocket assistant for life and your one-stop shop for all things credit. We are looking at blockchain and how we can play there. So there's a lot of different things. It's hard to say.
Yeah, cool. I wasn't going to ask you this, but I am interested because you brought it up twice now. What are your views on how blockchain may or may not disrupt or add to or improve your space? Where do you see it likely to go? And I realize that this is a crystal ball gazing question, so I'm just asking you like for straight up opinions, not facts.
Not only is a crystal ball, I'm probably is like tech illiterate as I am, blockchain illiterate is probably worse. So I'm probably, I have to still educate myself a lot on that space, but it's big enough where people that I really, really trust have either gone to work in the space full time or are all about it and really believe it's going to be kind of the next version of the internet. And so I think it would be, the way I view it for us is, I don't necessarily believe we need to be the first, because I think that there are some foundational pieces that still need to be built before we come into the space fully. So for example, again, I'm going to do a disservice, but the domain name on the blockchain, right? Like they just created a way for it to be, instead of that 16-digit character being like a name, right? So those are the fundamental pieces that I think need to be figured out on blockchain. And I don't think we need to be the ones to figure those things out. Those need to be figured out before we kind of make a big play. But I do think that we need to start thinking about how we bring credit world into the world of blockchain and how we kind of neutralize assets, right? Like if you own assets in the Philippines, you should get credit for that in the US, right? So how do you ensure that when somebody is trying to assess you in terms of credit worthiness or finance worthiness, forget about even credit, that they're really looking at the true picture and not just some stupid 3-digit number that is completely flawed and broken, right? And so I think that's what needs to change. And hopefully with blockchain, we can start to do that. So we're playing with a lot of different things, whether it's pushing data to the blockchain and creating our own version, or having a digital wallet that we are using. I mean, there's a lot of different things that we're looking at. whether
Yeah,
we do
interesting.
loans. Yeah.
For what it's worth, I agree with your take. We play a lot in the blockchain space, and I agree with your take 100%. Stay close to it, watch what's happening. Don't try and create the technology.
Yeah.
Just be close enough to adopt it because it's still so early. I can also tell you that I speak to fintech founders like yourself every single day, and every single one of them now is either actively looking to build it into their fintech, like they have already started, or they are watching it very, very closely beyond just an interest, literally without fail. And we've been in the space for 5 years now, and it's been amazing to watch that because 5 years ago, 1 in 20 would even be thinking about it, saying this is bullshit. Now, literally 10 out of 10 are saying, oh, no, we're watching this really closely. Like we have to. It's crazy not to. So interesting to hear that, and maybe that's a bit of anecdotal, validation for your thoughts. Not that you need it,
helpful.
But it's there anyway. Cool. So I want to move on to some more rapid fire style questions. So we don't have to give long answers for these. It's really just sort of quick fire questions. So number one, you seem very chilled. You seem very focused. You're achieving amazing things. How do you stay sane and focused and energized with all of the stuff you've got going on in your life?
God, I have a really good partner. I work out a lot, and I have help at home. I mean, I think that's the key, right? Like people always ask me, how do you do what you do? And I said, well, I have a good husband and I pay for help at home, right? Because I have 3 kids. And so I think it's making sure that whatever it is for you, I like to read, I like to sometimes, watch shows, I like to exercise, whatever that is for you is making sure you are a little bit selfish with time for yourself as well. And I am selfish with my time. I used to not be selfish with my time. Today, I'm very selfish with my time. I don't do things I don't want to do anymore.
Yeah. I wouldn't call that selfish. I would say deliberate, because I don't think that is selfish, just for what it's worth. Like you can't show up for your husband and your kids and your business if you're just giving yourself to everything. Yeah. And, I'm the same. I'm extremely deliberate with my time, and I never used to be. Next question. What are you saying no to?
Things that don't interest me or things that I don't believe in. I love to mentor young people. I love to talk to people and give a general advice. I will almost always talk to people who are interested in speaking with me. But like for business perspective, I have investors reaching out to me every day. And if they can't articulate why we fit exactly within their investment criteria, I don't want to talk to them. And if they're an associate, I don't want to talk to them. So, and I'm very, very harsh about that.
Love it. What is your biggest challenge or fear in your business?
Not succeeding, obviously, even though I know that I'll do everything. There's no way we won't succeed. There's always still that kind of, are we going to make it? Are we going to make it? Are we going to make it? Yeah.
What single piece of advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
To try as much as you can. I think for me, having been in all these different companies and all these different industries, big, small, private, public, has really given me an idea to know that this is where I need to be, right? So just work for a lot of different things and don't take things for granted, and don't think the grass is always greener on the other side, because it's not.
I just got to share something. One of the guys in my forum, in my EO forum, he has such a great response to the grass is greener on the other side. He's like, if the grass is greener on the other side, just water your own goddamn grass, man. Just take care of your own grass.
I like that.
I just love his take. I was like, that's the answer, man. What content are you consuming currently?
What am I reading? I'm trying to think. I haven't actually done a business book in the last 2 or 3 months. I read this book called, I'm spacing on it. It's something like When Things Go Wrong, because they will. Something like that. I don't remember. But that was an interesting read. And then my favorite content to consume, honestly, is we get these, it's called the Morning Brew or the Daily Skim, where it just kind of summarizes everything going on for you in very short snippets. And that to me, I think is just really, and podcasts. Guy Raz, How I Built This, is still my favorite go-to podcast.
Yeah, so good. Such a good podcast. Do you listen to the All In podcast?
No.
You got to check that out. It's my favorite. Yeah.
All In? All right. I'll have to write that
The
down.
All In podcast. It's with Chamath Palihapitiya, David
Okay.
Sachs, Jason Friedberg. It's so good. So good. Anyway.
That's the bummer with winter is I'm not walking in the mornings. I usually go walking at like 5:30 in the morning, but it's so dark now. It's like, yeah, well, it's dark. It's like scary. Yeah. So
what is something that you're doing in the next 7 days to improve yourself or your craft?
Just talking to people, reading, talking to people, being in tune with what's going on. There's no 7 days for me. It's just a constant, right? It's constantly being open, listening, noticing what's going on around you, being open to talking to anybody who will talk to you, right? I think you can learn something from everybody that comes into your life, always.
Yeah, agree 100%. So look, we've jumped around a lot today because that's what I tend to do, and I love that. We've spoken about a lot. Of everything we've spoken about, what is the one thing that you would like the listeners to leave today's episode with?
I think that it's not easy to start a company, but if it's something you've always wanted to do, there's never a good time to do it. It's kind of like moving or having a baby. You just need to do it. Like there's never going to be the right time. And that things are never as good as they seem, and they're never as bad as they seem.
I love
that.
So
I think that to me is something that kind of really helps me think through. Like when things are down, I'm like, okay, it's never as bad as I think it is. And when they're really good, it's like, it's amazing, but like that, the shadow's right around the corner. So
I love that. Nirit, it's been super cool talking to you. It's been inspiring. It's been interesting. I love your openness. I love your directness. It's really, really cool. Do you like to be contacted and or followed? And if you do, how can the listeners contact or follow you?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn obviously is probably where I'm the most active, although Dovely has all of the social media things, Twitter, everything. And so check us out at www.dovely.com, and you can follow me on LinkedIn and contact me if you want. It's Nirit at dovely.com.
Nirit, thanks for making the time. It's been really, really great. I really do appreciate it. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
And to the listeners, I hope you got some value from today's episode with Nirit Rubenstein from Dovely. I definitely did. I think my main takeaway was just the comment that Nirit made about like early stage. It's not really, you're not taking it seriously unless you started to hire people and actually pay people salaries. And I think there's a lot in that. It's a bit oversimplified the way that I've just said it, but I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, and I'm definitely going to use that and steal that. Thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like to discuss your fintech or blockchain project with us, you're welcome to book a call with me or one of our principals. Just head over to our website, www.nona.digital, and I'll be back next week with another episode to explore the FinTech Founder Journey.